Thank you for the opportunity to present on the Gary Paxton Industrial Park vessel haul out project and shipyard that we have going out at the Gary Paxton Industrial Park. We currently have some concepts for the haul out piers and shipyard location and configuration that is going before the Gary Paxton Industrial Board and soon the assembly for selection. And I just wanted to give a brief overview of how these concepts work and help those who perhaps can't make it to the meeting. You'll get a lot more detail out of the meeting. But if you can't make it, this sort of helps give you a rundown as we lead towards this decision. My name is Michael Harmon. I'm the project manager and municipal engineer for the city and borough of Sitka. We have quite an array of projects going on right now, over $150 million in backlog. And so you'll probably hear from me on a number of projects. I have videos out for the airport terminal project if you want to check that out as well. That's another exciting one we have going that will really impact sort of the quality of life in Sitka. Our project team here on the shipyard, Gary White is your Gary Paxton Industrial Park Board Director. So reach out to him also with any questions that you have with the park in general and long-term planning and operational questions outside the project. Our design team, we have P&D engineers. Dick Somerville is the head of that. Tyler Bradshaw is project manager. And then we have Greg Meisner, who is a marine service planner, sort of our subject matter expert on operating shipyards in Southeast Alaska. He ran the Wrangell shipyard and was involved in building that up from ground zero. So giving us some very valuable lessons learned and input from the operations standpoint. Moving forward, here I just want to do our synopsis of what I'm going to cover here quickly. The project charter, goals and schedules, that sort of just outlines our scope of the project that will ultimately look for assembly approval by the end of July to lock in our design that we'll move forward with. We have a general scope of the improvements. We have our meeting schedules coming up, and we'll go through the concepts we have and how the different pros and cons for each one of those and next steps. Our project charter outlines our goals for the project, and we're focused in on a 150-ton lift that will serve the vast majority of the Sitka fleet. There's very few boats that 150-ton can't lift, and provides that best balance of not having something too large and inefficient that could haul maybe boats that are outside of Sitka, but make it really inefficient in the yard and inefficient for the Sitka fleet to be serviced if that was the only thing that we had. We're going to plan for the future though, to be able to expand into bigger lifts as needed. And we're going to develop an upland working shipyard. Of course, as we pull the vessels out of the water, we need areas for them to be worked on and be staged and be able to have vendors come in and provide those needed services. And there's a big goal in this to retain and grow our local marine service sector jobs. By providing a facility like this, like what Wrangell has seen, you can potentially get some significant growth in that area. And as we can service vessels more and more are attracted to come to Sitka and get their services done. So that can be a positive economic generator for us. As we reduce travel costs and emissions of folks in Sitka needing to go all the way to Wrangell or Juneau to get their services done, is also an important goal. Our project charter, if you're into tracking the details on the project, we do a regular update to this, what we call the cover sheet summary. And at the top of that, you will see recently completed activities. You can track the project as we go, and then we outline upcoming events or major milestones to completion here on the right-hand side at the top. And we put those currently in quarters by year. So we're looking at completing this project by the end of 2024. You have all the on-site construction done. And we fully recognize this project is so important to get done as quick as possible. And we often get asked, why does a project like this take so long to get done all the way to the end of 2024? Well, the critical path on that is modern day environmental permitting that we have to do. Takes up to 18 months or even longer. We'll see how that goes. There's a potential for it to be longer than that. That is our critical path. And to get started on that, we had to know the location. So the GPIP board selected the location that we're going to build this facility, and that enabled us to get going on some of the entry level environmental work. And then as we select a concept, we'll be able to go further into that. So that is our critical path that drives the whole process. We can't do design, can't do our geotech investigation and many of the things we need to do for design until that permitting is done. So all this work we're sort of doing to plan out for the future and look at these concepts in the long run are not holding up the project. We've received concerns that perhaps we're spending too much time planning for the future with a larger lift potential. And I just want to make sure folks understand that that's not holding up the project. The environmental permitting is our critical path. So as we're going through this planning, it's good to make sure what we're putting in will work for the future. And that's what we're trying to do. Apologize there, jumping ahead. Going through the budget, we have $8.180 million. Approximately $8.2 million for this project that was passed locally with the vote out of the proceeds of the hospital to go into this project. So that's what we're working on. There's a lot of improvements needed to build the shipyard, especially if we wanted something of the magnitude that Wrangell has. We know that won't get us there. So we'll in these updates be continuing to show a shortfall and an opportunity to go after more grant funding and to continue to expand this project into future phases. At the bottom here, we just, as we go, we both show the planned contracts for this phase that we anticipate having and the dollars for those allocated to them that will likely projected to see. And then as we go, we update these to put in the real contract amounts as they're secured. So far we have P&D engineers secured for the planning and design, be the planning and design team, and we have their scope secured for that entry level work with the environmental permitting that's going and surveying, and their contract is secured there. That's the first line item. Moving on, the project design schedules outlined here and I already went over to get completed in 2024. This gives you a more detailed breakdown, and again, the asterisks there were highlighting the geotech field investigation work we need done to do the design is tied to the environmental permitting getting started and getting to initial consultation level in order for that to move forward. So that is our critical path that drives the entire schedule at this point to get to completion. General scope of improvements that we're looking at. We want to maximize the phase one It's our $8.2 million. How do we get the most out of that dollars to have an operating 150-ton boat hoist that we can pull vessels out of the water and do some basic maintenance? We need a washdown pad for that and wash water treatment. The water coming off of that pad needs to be treated. We will maximize a boatyard as much as we have funding for, and we will need to deal with the stormwater treatment that comes off of that. So all the stormwater that comes off the boatyard is treated in a different way from the washdown pad, and we need infrastructure there. Ultimately, more in a future phase, you'd start getting into power and lighting, water and sewer service, and on-site restrooms, shops, and those sort of things that you traditionally see in a shipyard would be coming in a phase 2, given we don't have the funding to get into those pieces at that time. This just shows some travel lift sizes. This is the 150-ton out of the Wrangell yard. It's an idea of size. When you go up to 300-ton that we're potentially planning for in the future, you can see how much larger a lift and the magnitude of vessels that can pull. Looking at a shipyard, when you look at even a 150-ton lift is depicted here, you can see how large that piece of equipment is. Lifting a small trawler here, very narrow vessel. You can see as you get into those larger and larger lifts, that becomes challenging to lift those small vessels. So 150-ton can do it, and it sort of shows the multitude of size of vessels that those lift in this picture and are capable to service the Sitka fleet very well. Also notice how wide the lift here is side to side, and so as you store vessels, you end up taking up a lot of space. You need a large shipyard area when you park these with a marine hoist to fit them in each slot and the width they take. And we'll talk about some options to help with that, to maximize your yard a little bit better and be able to park vessels closer together with some options. You can see a traditional pier here going out that the marine hoist goes out on to lift the boats, and they have their washdown pad here in Huna positioned right off, coming off of that pier system. And then they do have a outbuilding here with all their mechanical restrooms, office space here for their boatyard. Well, getting right into one of the options. So how do we stack boats more efficiently and closer? They're in boatyard transporters, and various sizes of those, but we could take the medium and smaller boats, and the boat hoist can drop them right on these trailers, and you can use a basic front end loader, for instance. Some of them come self-propelled, all different price points on these, to be able to stack your boats much closer together and more efficiently and quickly in the yard and in the tight spaces. So that would be a great option to sort of have that combination of the boat hoist working at the waterfront to lift and put boats in and out of the water, stay busy on that while a transporter is busy moving boats about the yard and getting them to their business of repair and so forth, without taking the time away from the boat hoist. So it can be a pretty good combination. Washdown pads, this sort of shows what all goes into that. Extensive rebar and concrete work and drainage systems and water treatment for the washdown water on these. You can see some piping going into this one for a heated slab. We are recommending and planning for that piping at least to go in. It's cheap and easy to do, sort of when you're pouring the concrete. Once you pour it, you can't do it after the fact very well. So you throw that in as you're going, and then it provides that opportunity to provide heat, which can be very valuable in the colder months. So when you're washing down a boat, you don't have a big ice rink on top of this. It can be very, very dangerous to deal with. So Wrangell really wishes they would have put that in their pad and kind of learned to try and allow for that in the future in our case. Again, mechanical building, restrooms, having an outbuilding would help service the yard very much so, for all the needs to, they have their heated pad furnace inside here that heats the water to heat up their wash down pad out here, and all those facilities. Important to have a building to house them. Just gives you an idea some of the utilities you think about, from water to electrical and all that goes into providing your connections out throughout the yard for electrical and your main service boards and security, fencing, all common things you'll see at a shipyard that we're looking at, as is security, lighting, fire protection. It's an example of a stormwater treatment facility. So you have your washdown pad treatment goes to the sanitary sewer system, where your stormwater throughout the site can't do that. It would discharge directly into the bay, but needs treatment. It's required before it does that. So we're planning for that to go in an underground system similar to what is depicted here. Meeting schedule. So we already completed our first meeting with GPIP to make our first major decision, which was the location that we are putting the Haulout in. That was selected. And then we took that location and we refined concepts and then presented those to a subject matter expert group. And got direct feedback from them, and in addition with the public, sort of proof those and vet those concepts as much as possible before taking them to the GPIP board for the first time, which will happen June 22nd. And we'll present those in detail at that meeting and try and get a location sort of the shipyard configuration preferences and the best concept for the location that has been selected. Then we, as needed, we have room for additional meetings in June and July off of the feedback that we get from the Gary Paxton Industrial Park Board. If we need to do further refinements and come back to them, if they are satisfied with one of the options we've selected, we'll go ahead and move that forward to the assembly. Our goal is to get a final selection done by the end of July, so we cannot hold up the permitting process. We need that selection and those drawings to go into that process and not impact the critical path. And that is our immediate schedule. So the subject matter expert panel I was talking about that we roped into this project, and we really appreciate for all their help they provided and feedback they're providing. These folks have run a Haulout or have studied them extensively and have quite a bit of experience. So we were looking for that local feedback in terms of what we've seen in the past with shipyards in Sitka and what's worked well and hasn't worked well, and had a great meeting with this group consisting of Mike Johnson, Rob Leo, Eric Majeski, Jeremy Circa, and then our expert hired under P&D, Greg Meisner. Had a very productive conversation in a meeting and also outside of the meetings as they're available. We've been bouncing questions off of them, getting feedback. It's been greatly appreciated. So here we are at the Gary Paxton Industrial Park, existing site conditions. Just sort of shows the layout of the park. If you're familiar of it, we have looped in road systems. We have our multi-purpose dock out here that provides quite a bit of different activities, can be used as a workflow, can be used as loading and unloading vessels. We have some smaller cruise ships that go in here, and this dashed line sort of represents the maximum size cruise vessel that can go into there. Over here, we have the existing gravel haul-out ramp, and that is the selected location for the haul-out piers at this time. We'll be really focusing on this area with ownership in the park by the city remains throughout this area over here and this area over here. So our first concept, let's get into the concepts, options for a pier, and how do we get vessels hauled out in Sitka with a 150-ton pier. This is our lowest cost option that matches our budget, sort of matches our charter scope of what we could best fit in a 150-ton to get vessels hauled out, get them on a wash pad, and get basic repairs done. That's our goal with the current funding. So this depicts a little bit of fill coming out here to get to deeper water, and then the yellow here is your elevated piers that come out, 2 fingers that marine travel lift goes out on to pick up a vessel here out of the water and bring them on the shore side. So we have approximately 0.7 acres of additional area and fill going in here. And we have a optional gangway and float, so folks can come tie up here as they're getting prepared to come in and get lifted or waiting in line for that activity. Also provides a way for folks to get off the vessel as they pull their boat into the slip and into the marine hoist to be able to get off and go up the gangway. And so a lot of different uses for that. And that is the basic layout of the no frills, no future expansion planned in this. Just 150-ton lift, get boats hauled out of the water. So what are some options we could move from there and look to expand? So option 2 looks at a further growth perspective of how we can get to a 300-ton lift, which seems to be the next size up, most common size that would service Sitka in the future the best. You could build that facility off to the east here, east side of the slip. So this darker yellow shows what we'd build in a phase 1, and then the lighter yellow shows we would expand this pier out to get out to the length of a 300-ton out in deeper water, and we build the second pier over here, and then we would add, these are deck overs that you add in order for the lift to be able to start turning and maneuvering before it gets completely off the pier, which we need that turning movements to work out for us. And these deck overs also can be used to pull right out and load boats and do some different things with. So those are optional on the 150-ton in this configuration. That they would be pretty much mandatory on the 300-ton this configuration in order to do the turning movements you need to do to get around the SIAC logistics building you see here as you bring this vessel out of the water. That's the real challenge with this concept. It lines up to run into this property line. So you got to do a very difficult turning movement to get off of here and get that boat in. Not ideal, but does show if you built this phase one concept and you hardened this middle pier, strengthen that up to be able to handle a 300-ton lift load, it could easily be expanded like this in the future. So jumping back to concept one to concept two here, as I flip back and forth, you can just see it's very similar. The only difference is this middle pier gets further reinforcement for the future of a 300-ton lift, which makes the project more expensive for concept two to sort of plan for that future expansion. Now we have concept number three. Again, if we compare 2 to 3, 2 going back and forth here, the difference is the configuration gets flip-flopped. So the 300-ton now here is at the bottom configuration here to the west of the first phase darker yellow piers that would be put in. This allows the 300-ton lift to have a straight shot into the shipyard, which is much more ideal. However, to build this 150-ton lift in this configuration, you now need 0.18 acres of fill. You got to get way over here in the first phase to build this to allow for the future expansion area on this side. Again, going back to concept two, you can see all this additional for the 300-ton can be added later. And this fits with your minimum fill, very similar to, excuse me, very similar to concept number one. So concept number three is our most expensive option for phase one to get all this built, to get over there to this location. Concept number four tries to take sort of that initial fill area and maximize it to where it could also be used for the future and to make also line up with the shipyard. What we do here is we have the initial phase 150-ton lift that the boats pull in right here with, and then in the future we would extend these piers out into deeper water and lengthen for the larger lift to operate out here on the seaward side of our first phase 150-ton lift. This is a very streamlined approach to not widening out, needing to widen your fill, get both lifts in, works well in a narrow corridor like we have. The narrow upland corridor to kind of line up with and get vessels going up into the shipyards. This works very well to line up with that, to do minimal fill in the initial compared to concept one. However, have more cost to strengthen these piers, have to be able to handle the load of a 300-ton lift. So we have additional funding in this concept in phase one to do that in order to plan for that in the future. So that's the difference. Also in these concepts, you'll notice we have the dashed line over here depicts the largest tour vessel or the largest vessel in general. It can use the multi-purpose dock as configured. So we're looking to make sure we have proper egress into this facility here, and it looks like it will work well. We are very tight to fit up against here the property line associated to the Marine Hansen dock. I'm sorry, the Hansen Marine dock. So the widened area here they have of tidelands, just right up against the corner of that. So we're configured in as efficiently to this side as we can to reduce the needed fill and reduce our expenses and fit within these boundaries. Going forward, looking at the shipyard, we have sort of a full build out. We can't afford this at this time, full build out layout associated to the shipyard. We have broken that out into a north yard and a west boat yard. This is the existing roadway that flows through here. Just kind of orientate you to the park if you're familiar being out here in the looped road around. And these areas are what we have available that show the boat slips here to work with. So we also show a new future gravel haul out ramp over here, since we're taking the place of the current one in our location. So that could fit in fairly well over here. And actually the tidal grades and elevations that we have over here in slopes work much better for a ramp, where it drops off really fast here and the ramp can't extend out as far in its current location as it could there. So it works out pretty well. So we depict a concept 4 here configuration coming into a potential washdown pad like Kuna has right off of the lift. We have washdown pad options right here next to the lift dashed in. It's a possibility. We have one over here in the north boat yard, and then kind of one here in the middle. When we reviewed that with the subject matter expert team, they got pretty united that this one here in the corner that my cursor's hovering over would be the most ideal location. That obviously takes up some of these parking spots, but the advantage to that is it gets it out of the way of the coming and going and lifting of boats out of your pier, so it doesn't become a bottleneck. If you have somebody doing a washdown, that could take quite a bit of time, up to an hour or so for a bigger boat, and then that would hold up your whole operation to pull and drop off boats out of your pier. So putting that off to the side allows them to come off, rotate, and back right into that spot. Works really well. So that you'll see in our future concepts is our preferred. We have approximately 83 boat slip locations in a full build out here. I apologize, that's 63. The lettering's really small on my screen there. So 63 boat slips in this configuration. We continue to work on that to maximize it, but just gives you an idea how many boats we could park out there, how it would lay out. Different sizes. The north yard sort of focused on the larger vessels. Here would go down that corridor, and mid-sized boats in the west yard. And then we also maximize some of our property going down the road here. The recommendation from the group so far is concept 4. It looks like our preferred option for being able to plan for the future, be able to get most of the same amenities afforded into the project to get it operational, sort of providing the best balance of current needs and future needs. We would be able to rough in a yard, get the grading done so that boat hoists can move around, be able to get some vehicle parking. That was a focus of the group, to make sure places for folks coming to the yard to park and be out of the way. That can be a major problem if you don't have that. So try and get some of these basic functions put together with the funding we have. We can do that with concept 4. So we put together a concept 4 layout that sort of better aligns with the money we have. With the phase 1, you see a much smaller boat yard here, for kind of developing at least a piece of the north boat yard. Washdown pads in its preferred location, and a little bit of vehicle parking be positioned over here. So you getting upwards, almost being able to fit nearly 20 boats and parking out of this configuration with some rough grading and drainage budgeted for that. Get a basic functioning haul out with our million out of this. Scope of work under each concept has been adjusted to match the $8.18 million budget that we have. Each concept includes the minimum scope necessary to support a 150-ton lift and meet regulatory requirements for the operation of a small boat yard. The budgets then were adjusted to include the 150-ton boat lift. We certainly need that hoist to be operational, so we made sure that was included in as a minimum. And then we also need a wash down pad and the associated treatment of that to be functional. So that is also included as a base in our $8 million. Everything beyond that quickly exceeds our budget. So, and we'll show additional options in our budget as additional funding comes forward that would be ideal to add into the project. So looking at budgets, concept number one, that one being the one that does not plan for the future and have additional funding going into the piers for the future, provides the most money available to get us a permanent concrete washdown pad. So that's its advantage over all the other concepts, that it can afford to provide that, whereas the additional concepts I'll show you in the budget would only be able to have a temporary membrane washdown pad installed with the funding we have. So that's its advantage. Its disadvantage is it does not plan for the future in terms of being able to accommodate a 300-ton lift. It would have to be retrofitted at a much higher cost to do that in the future. So as we scroll down below our $8.1 million that has the base pieces that I just discussed that we have in all the concepts to reach to that budget, we drop down into what we call additive alternate alternatives. This additional funding becomes available. And you see some of the very common things that I've pointed out that you see in other yards that are very important. Additional yard grading, queuing floats and the deck over and gangways, utilities, electric and water, and those sorts of things would all be additional. And if you just did some basic grading of the north yard, get more drainage into that, get your queuing gangway, get down to line number 12 here. This is what the charter kind of represents. A $12 million phase one project would get you those basic amenities. So we're looking for that additional funding to try and get to that $12 million mark. Ideally, that would be your ideal phase one. But even at $8.1 million, we can be functioning to a degree to get started. And then as you go from there, looking at that additional 40-ton yard transporter that would help you stack the boats closer in the yard, move around a more active state, get your deck overs, get your gravel haul out ramp, and your marine hoist upgrades. There's upgrades to the hoist that can actually make it go narrower and be more flexible, be more mobile in terms of being four-wheel, all-wheel drive. So those be really nice options to have to get you to a total of a $13 million, $13.7 million, 150-ton, fully operational shipyard. Moving on to concept two, all the similar elements here and how this works. What we're highlighting in yellow here, again, with the added cost going into your piers to plan for the 300-ton lift to be added in the future. The additional cost does not allow us to afford a permanent washdown pad. So we'd have a temporary washdown pad put in for now to be functional at a much lower cost. That allows us to stay within that $8 million budget and have these core amenities 1 through 7 here that you generally see in all these concepts. Moving below the line, again, you can just see all the common additions that we'd like to see in the boatyard, where this one expands now. If you look at line 13, we are looking at that 300-ton capability, all the uplands, expansion area for 300-ton lift. That adds in significantly more cost to this option to get us down to $20 million in total when you're kind of planning out a more full build out like this to get the 300-ton future expansion in the mix and get all these amenities accounted for. Phase 1 still, in this upper budget here, just to remind ourselves here in all these concepts, do not construct the 300-ton. It just plans for it in the future. So you got to get all the way down these expenses to kind of get that total option into the fray here. Moving on to concept number 3 here. That one is just sort of the mirror flip-flop of that 300-ton and putting it so the configuration of 300-ton lines up better with the shipyard. Numbers are very similar in that concept, except your phase 1, again, to get that fill in there is much more expensive. And we actually cannot afford in this concept to get a full marine boat hoist. So, and this is the really important line item, number 7, to note out of this concept. We would only have $390,000, which is insufficient to purchase a new marine boat hoist. Probably unlikely to even be able to purchase a used one. So this one sort of is our one concept that almost starts really feeling infeasible with our current funding, unless we get additional funding for that boat hoist to really work out. So much money needs to go into that additional fill for that to work. All the additional amenities here to bring in the 300-ton and bring us up to a total very similar to concept number 2 of 20 million for the full operation on that concept. Going into option 4, this is our long linear where the boat hoist operates with the 300-ton going out into deeper water. This option, compared to concept number 1, more money's going into those piers. They have to be able to support that load, a 300-ton load in the future. So very similar to concept number 2, we had to drop back to a temporary washdown pad in order to afford that expansion for the 300-ton loading on the pier. So that's where it drops from the concept number 1, but we can still afford the travel hoist in this one compared to concept number 3. So 2 and 4 get the full hoist. We just have to sacrifice on the washdown pad. Gets us within that $8.2 million budget. And then again, all the additional options to add to that to get to the 300-ton gets us to a total of almost $17 million for a total on that. So the key takeaways here, concept one is the only option that does not meet charter objectives, falling short of funding for 150-ton boat hoist. Concept one is the only option that does not include future 300-ton expansion. However, it can afford the permanent concrete washdown pad. All other concepts include a temporary washdown pad membrane liner. Concept 2 and 4 provide for a future expansion to a 300-ton boat hoist, but those extra costs preclude the permanent washdown pad in phase 1. Concept 4 is a roughly $4 million less to expand to 300-ton facility. It can also be reconfigured similar to concept number 2 in the future if so desired. So you could expand that to be a parallel hoist to the east side of that boat hoist if you wanted to, but we really feel like the long linear is the right approach given our narrow corridor to move boats up into. Concept number 2, we can't forget how challenging that is for the 300-ton lift to operate and turn around the SIAC building. So that's really where the concept 4 shines in order to move that larger vessel around the shipyard. So this is sort of the briefing. I sure hope this presentation helps give you an overview. If you're unable to attend the meetings, we will again be briefing this with the GPIP board and hopefully getting a concept selection. The SME group preferred that concept 4. So and most of the comments we've been getting in on the project match up with that. We will continue to proceed on the project, take this to the assembly for final approval. When we get that, we'll be launching into design activities, permitting, and geotech will continue. We encourage you to go to our project site, the project site where you can keep updated and see all these drawings and explore this in further detail. We have an email address dedicated. If you go to that site, please look at our email address, give us any comments you have that goes directly to the project team, and we'll be sharing those as we go with the GPIP board and the assembly. So please engage in that way. To get to that, go to our city website. You can see it right in current news. And here's the link to our city website. You can also go directly in the public works page. You can see the GPIP Haulout links. And this is our email address to go ahead and hit that and send us directly any comments that you have. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you found this video helpful to keep you up to speed.